I called my father 6 times from an emergency room bed while machines beeped around me, and every single call rang out into silence. He was too busy helping my brother paint the nursery for a baby that wasn't even born yet, 40 minutes away. I lay there with a needle in my arm and a mask over my face, watching my phone screen tell me exactly where I ranked in my own family. As a trauma nurse who had spent 11 years keeping strangers alive, I never imagined I'd be the one gasping for air while the people who raised me scrolled past my calls. My name is Delphine Marsh, and at 29 years old, I had quietly become the backbone of a family that never once looked back to see who was holding it up. For months, I had been ignoring the warning signs, the crushing fatigue after 12-hour shifts, the way my left side had started going numb without warning. My colleagues joked that nurses make the worst patients, and I proved them right by swallowing painkillers and clocking back in. I was the one who paid my father's truck insurance every month without him knowing it came from me, the one who wired money to my brother Callum whenever his construction business hit a dry spell, the one who never asked for a single thing in return, because being needed had started to feel close enough to being loved. A week before everything fell apart, I mentioned to my father that I'd been having chest pains at work. He laughed and told me I was too stubborn to ever actually get sick. He was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the hospital break room, when the fluorescent lights blurred and my own heartbeat turned into a violent stutter against my ribs. My coworker Priya caught me before I hit the tile floor and started compressions before I even lost consciousness completely. I remember flashes, the crash cart, someone shouting my blood pressure, the cold shock of the defibrillator pads against my chest. When I woke up in the cardiac ICU, a doctor was telling me I'd suffered a sudden arrhythmia that nearly stopped my heart for good, and that the next 2 days would determine whether I'd need surgery to survive. Alone in that room with wires taped to my chest and a monitor tracing every uneven beat of my heart, I called my father first. Straight to voicemail. I called my brother. Straight to voicemail. I told myself they were busy, that they'd call back any minute, that surely nothing mattered more than their daughter possibly dying in a hospital bed. 2 hours and 6 unanswered calls later, I opened the family group chat and found photos my father had posted 20 minutes earlier, laughing beside a half-painted crib, captioned with 3 heart emojis and the words, "Future looks bright." My brother had reacted with a thumbs up. Nobody had mentioned my voicemails at all. My phone finally lit up an hour after that, and for one foolish second my chest filled with relief. It was a text from my stepmother, telling me to feel better soon, and that I was lucky to be somewhere with doctors around me, as though I'd checked into a spa instead of a cardiac unit. I stared at those words until they blurred, understanding for the first time that my family didn't see my pain. They just filed it away as an inconvenience that wasn't currently their problem. There was one person left in my contacts I hadn't tried. My cousin Reeve, 26, a high school shop teacher who had drifted from the family years ago after refusing to keep bankrolling my father's excuses. I almost didn't call, ashamed of needing anyone. He picked up before the second ring, and the second I said the word hospital, he cut me off and asked only one question: which one? He was in the parking garage within the hour, still in his sawdust-covered work boots, gripping my hand like he could physically keep my heart beating through sheer will. He didn't leave that vinyl chair for 2 days. He slept sitting upright, woke at every beep, argued with a nurse on my behalf when my pain meds ran late. For the first time in my adult life, I understood what it actually felt like to have someone show up for me instead of the other way around. By the 3rd morning, my heart rhythm had stabilized enough for the surgery to be postponed, and in that stillness, a colder kind of clarity settled over me. I thought about every mortgage payment, every wired loan, every silent sacrifice I had made for people who couldn't be bothered to pick up a phone while I might have been undying. And I thought about Reeve, who had nothing to gain and gave everything anyway. I asked the nurse to bring me my laptop and my bag, because I had calls of my own to make, the kind that don't ring out. My attorney arrived that afternoon, and my hospital tray became a desk for the most important signature of my life. I removed my father as beneficiary on every policy I'd built in his name. I canceled the standing transfer that had quietly covered his truck payments for 3 years. I withdrew the funds I had promised toward my brother's business expansion before the transfer could process. In their place, I named Reeve, and I set aside the rest to a fund for ICU nurses who burn themselves out keeping other families' hearts beating while nobody keeps track of their own. My brother called that evening, the first contact from either of them in 3 days, and he didn't ask how I was doing. He asked why a loan he was counting on had suddenly disappeared from his account. I told him calmly that I had called him 6 times while he was choosing paint colors, and that silence has a cost just like everything else does. He didn't understand. He never expected me to actually stop being the answer to every problem that wasn't mine. The next day they came together, my father leading with a bouquet from the hospital gift shop and an expression rehearsed to look like concern instead of panic about money. I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid the signed documents across the table and told them exactly what I had changed and why. My father's face went rigid, and then he was shouting that I was punishing family over a misunderstanding, that I was cold, that I had changed. I looked at him and said that he had spent my whole life calling me strong so he'd never have to be the one who showed up, and that I was finally strong enough to stop waiting for him to. My brother stood by the door saying nothing at all, because for the first time, there was nothing left for him to take. I went home to a life rebuilt around the one person who never once let my phone ring out, and I understood finally that being needed was never the same thing as being loved.